So the Tucker Carlson interview of Putin is still in the news, and we've gotten through some aftermaths. So I don't think that it worked out like Putin would have liked it to. I think that it was far less potent than Putin likes, far less useful than Tucker would have liked, because I think Tucker was really trying to make a compelling case, especially about the conservative kind of crowd. Like, so what does your Orthodox faith mean to you? And then he kind of totally ditched it, or asked about spirituality or things along those lines. And he kind of went into a weird history lesson. I don't mean the starting history lesson. I mean another history lesson about the Romans and the Mongols later on, after he was asked about his spiritual perspective. So both of them kind of missed it on that. But we're going to watch how this was done on Russian state media with Margarita Simonyan talking about it. This is the Russian Media Monitor, and they do some great work. And here we're going to see what she has to say. Then we'll look at RT, we'll look at TASS, and then we'll look at what Tucker most recently said. So here we go. Thank you to the Russian Media Monitor. Okay. Go ahead, Margarita Simonova. Yes, I don't know how many years one should train in the art of public speaking, on the art of drama, the art of writing, the art of storytelling, as they call it now, to end this historic interview like this. The way it ended. When Tigran and I watched it live, both of us shed tears. He is a man, a grown-up guy, but nonetheless, I think it was the first time he said this is a civil war. This is an important milestone in the realization of what is happening. On the one hand, the process of reunification of souls into one common soul of one nation will be hard. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because you're destroying the lives of these people that are your common nation, that don't want to be a common nation with you, who have been forced to be a common nation with you in the past, like in the 30s when you starved them out during the Holodomor, and they don't want your nonsense anymore. So that'll be hard. On the other hand, for the same reason, the process is unavoidable. I totally agree. I don't think any normal person can interpret what Vladimir Vladimirovich said in any other way. It is sufficient to recall the example of both Chechen wars. Could we have imagined the Chechen people, with their arms in their hands, would defend the interests of Russia and the Russian world in this special military operation? Could we have imagined this 20 years ago? No. Nonetheless, this is the way it is. Now, let's stop there for a moment, because that's Philistine pig ignorance to think that the Ukrainians are going to be like the Chechens. They're not. There's a generational hatred that you've built up. Every time you kill one of their soldiers, one of their civilians, someone's grandmother who just happens to be driving down the road, you have created a tremendous mess, and it's not going to heal like you think. Now, about the interview itself. This was unquestionably a historic interview. This was the most successful, the most significant, a truly historic media event in journalism in the history of humanity. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Like, I know that you don't even believe this yourself, but you're going on and gushing about it. It was actually pretty terrible. Putin didn't get the mileage he wanted to get out of it. Tucker will not get the mileage he wanted to get out of it. And you're really trying to sell it. Of course, there is one small negative. It would be better off if this interview had happened earlier. Tucker reached out to us, and I'm sure we weren't the only ones he's contacted. He contacted us to help him arrange this interview. In the spring of 2021, before the special military operation, he intensified these efforts after the special military operation. He's a pushy person. Of course, I went to many offices. Going from office to office is my favorite pastime, begging for what I think is important for the country. The reactions were mixed. Someone said, "Who is he?" Some said, "Maybe we shouldn't." In the end, it turned out to be tremendous. It kind of upsets me that if it had happened earlier, the battles over aid to Ukraine in Congress would have been much more intense. Now, I think you're giving Tucker a little bit more credit than you should. The people that believe Tucker are already people that are populist isolationist types that tend to be philosophically already inclined. Those Reagan conservatives like me have already, like when Tucker would come on, would already turn off Fox News. It's not... So I don't think you're that he has the power that you think that he has. Because American congressmen and senators think about their voters. If their voters have a certain attitude, it's hard to make decisions contrary to the will of voters. We can definitely say that this interview changed a lot in the heads of American voters. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think it actually moved anyone. Probably not either direction, but certainly not the direction that Tucker was hoping to bring them. Without an exaggeration, there was a breakthrough in their heads. Only our president could stun them this way. Like, how weirdly foolish does that even sound? Like, if you heard somebody saying that about either Trump or Biden, depending on which side of the aisle you're on, like your guy, you heard him talking about it like that, even you would be like, this is a little cringy. Of course, they write that what shook them most of all was his college-level lecture, because these people suffer from horrible education. Now, she's talking about Americans. For American society, it's shocking that we're different, and our leader is different. It does not surprise us that Vladimir Vladimirovich spent 25 minutes telling a 1,000-year history of Rus and Ukraine. He's done it many times before. Just as we've remained a great reading nation. When I went to America in 1995, I moved in with a family, and I saw that in a 3-story house of a very wealthy family, there was not one book, not even a bookcase. Well, maybe it's just a small sample size, because there are a lot of American families that have lots of books and bookcases. So, maybe this isn't the best example. Where they could be kept in theory, this is the norm for the Western world. It remained this way up until now. They are different. They are in shock from this. They look at him as though he's an alien. How can it be that a man speaking for 25 minutes without looking at any notes? On top of that, he's naming names and dates. What started where? And who knows what else? He remembers it by heart. All we can do is rejoice and hope that, as we can see from the special military operation, the victory right now is not based on might and strength, but rather high tech and therefore knowledge and intellect. In the long term, I'm not talking about the special military operation, which we will win either way. In general, in global competition, we're condemned to victory. Oh, isn't that just wonderful? They're condemned to victory. Okay, that's enough of that. I really, people ask me, like, how do I put up with all this stuff? You'd be amazed at what I see that I just can't even bring myself to present before you. So let's move away from this and look at what is printed in RT. Tucker Carlson reveals Putin interview and reveals what radicalized him. And you read through the article and you get down to the part where it says what radicalized him. Carlson pointed out that he's 54 and he grew up in America that had nice, safe, beautiful cities, and we no longer have them. It was radicalizing to see Moscow cleaner and safer and prettier than American cities, he said, or to be reminded of in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, while in the US, one can't ride the subway in New York because it's dirty and unsafe. That's a voluntary choice, he said. You don't have to have crime, actually. Okay, fair enough. You don't have to have crime, and we probably could do some things with our cities to make them more safe. But is that really what radicalized him? Is that what made him go all in on Putin? When he actually came to Moscow, he saw the light? And do you think that he really saw all of Moscow, including the seamy underbelly, or just what the Russians wanted him to see? Here's a little bit more in TASS. Carlson says opposition from the U.S. authorities motivated him to interview Putin. He says the U.S. government prevented me from doing it by spying on my text messages and leaking them to the New York Times, and that spooked the Russian government into canceling the interview. He pointed out at the World Government Summit in Dubai. So once I discovered that that was happening and I confirmed it was happening and they admitted that they did it, I was totally determined, maniacally dedicated to doing this interview, not simply because I wanted to know what Vladimir Putin is like and what he thinks about the conflict in Ukraine, that is resetting the world and really gravely damaging my country's economy, but which are, by the way, those are Russian talking points right there, that's what's going on, but also because they told me I couldn't on the basis of illegitimate means and for no real clearly stated justification, Carlson noted. I want to live free in a free country. I was born in one, the U.S. journalist noted. Now, what's happening there, if it is true that that's what's happened, is called reactance. It's the same phenomenon at work that causes Trump voters to adhere to Trump even more because he's been charged with some counts of something and it looks like it's politically oriented persecution or politically motivated, because it looks like it's politically motivated persecution. It's reactance. That's all that is. That's if that's even true, but that's what he's saying. So let's look at what he's saying. Here's Tucker saying it for himself.
In its war against Russia, the Ukrainian military will not be able, even with Western backing, hundreds of billions of dollars of it, to expel the Russian military from parts of eastern Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't have the industrial capacity, neither does NATO or the United States, and it doesn't have the people. Russia has 100 million more in population than Ukraine does. And that means that further support from the West for the Ukrainian military only means more dead Ukrainians and a further degraded Western economy in the US and in Germany particularly.
But while Putin wants Russia to fight, Russians don't want to fight, and Ukrainians do want to fight because they have will, because for Ukraine, this is an existential threat. So you're kind of missing some of the picture. Okay, just a little bit more from Tucker.
So it's not simply a fool's errand, it's self-destruction. It's insane, it's cruel, it's abetting the killing of an entire generation of Ukrainians. This is very obvious. No honest person at this point will deny it. And yet...
Okay, that is not true. And it's not very obvious. And to say that no honest person will deny it is the no true Scotsman fallacy. And he does this kind of thing all the time. You're saying that I'm not an honest person because I'm supporting Ukraine. That's not true at all. But I think your motives may be a little suspect. And let's say you're biased. I'm biased the other direction. That doesn't mean that I'm not honest. So for multiple reasons, we can safely discount what he has to say here.
And yet somehow the United States Senate, which is always several years behind reality in its perceptions, just a few weeks ago, decided to send another $60 billion to the Ukrainian government, which is both corrupt and authoritarian.
How corrupt is the Ukrainian government? They went from 116 to 104. That means they're getting better on the corruption index from Transparency International, where Russia went from 136 to 144. That means they were worse and they're getting even more worse, but you're backing Russia. Let's keep going.
Canceled elections.
No, they didn't cancel elections. They're constitutionally prohibited from having elections during a time of martial law. And Tucker's not being fair with the facts.
An entire Christian denomination.
Oh, let's talk about that. This denomination is the Russian Orthodox Church, which has a political arm throughout the church pushing Russia's propaganda messages. And Russia in the occupied area was also banning other Christian denominations, but you won't hear Tucker talking about that.
And then they killed an American journalist.
I think he's talking about Gonzalo Lira, who is not a journalist in any meaningful way. And to some degree, Tucker isn't a full-on journalist either. He's a commentator, an opinion writer who's been working in journalism, but not journalist in the hard news sense. Gonzalo Lira certainly wasn't. Did he unfortunately die? Yes. Was he in custody? Yes. Why? Because he shouldn't have been taking pictures and sending them to the Russians, and he was under house arrest, but then tried to get out of that, and that's why he got himself in prison. And there's with all of these examples, there's more to the story. But this is the way that Tucker rolls, and if you're listening to Tucker, you're probably not somebody that can be convinced about that he's not right. I mean, if you're like, yeah, this is right. But if you're listening, if you're reading multiple sources and trying to make sense of it, looking at it from all angles, you'll probably see pretty quickly that Tucker's command of the facts here about Ukraine isn't really all that great. And I'm not trying to denigrate him personally, because I just don't do that. I may even agree with him on some other issues that are not related to Ukraine, but here he's just missing it. And we all have our blind spots. I have my blind spots, but he's not admitting or allowing for those blind spots. He's just stating this as if this is just obvious. It's true, it's a fact, but it's not necessarily so. So that's what I wanted to present to you about Tucker Carlson. That's all that I have. Put your comments below. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.